My name is Elise Hartman. The wedding album lies open on Aunt Maxine's coffee table, a glossy monument to betrayal. I stand frozen, my fingers tingling with numbness as I stare at my brother Nolan beaming beside his new wife, the same brother whose wedding I'm supposed to attend tomorrow. The afternoon sunlight streams through the bay windows of her tastefully decorated living room, illuminating photographs that feel like weapons aimed directly at my heart. Asterisk Elise. Honey, I thought you knew. Aunt Maxine's voice wavers behind me, thick with something worse than pity guilt. Her hands flutter nervously as she watches my reaction, and I can see the internal conflict playing across her face. She's been wrestling with this knowledge, probably for days, wrestling with loyalty to her sister against loyalty to me. The carefully wrapped crystal frame slips from my hands. The shattering glass echoes through the living room like a physical manifestation of what's happening inside me. Shards scatter across the hardwood floor, catching light from the afternoon sun and fragmenting it into 1,000 pieces, much like the fragments of hope I've been holding onto. Each piece that falls feels like another piece of my heart following suit, breaking into smaller and smaller parts until I'm not sure how I'll ever put myself back together. That's not possible, I hear myself say. My voice sounds strange and distant, as though it's coming from someone else entirely. I have the invitation right here. I fumble with my purse with trembling hands, extracting the thick cream envelope with my name written in elegant calligraphy. The weight of it feels different now, heavier somehow, as though the paper itself has absorbed all the lies it contains. Look, June 15th. Tomorrow, Aunt Maxine takes the invitation with trembling hands, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She adjusts them twice, as if the problem might be with her vision rather than the document itself. "Oh, Elise," she whispers, her voice breaking like thin ice beneath winter boots. "The wedding was last weekend. They sent you the wrong date." On purpose, the room tilts slightly, and I grip the edge of the sofa to steady myself. My mind struggles to process this information, running through possibilities and explanations, searching desperately for some way this could be a misunderstanding rather than deliberate cruelty. I'd taken a day off from my executive marketing position to prepare for tomorrow. I'd spent weeks searching for the perfect gift, the right dress, rehearsing conversations in my head about what I'd say to family members who barely acknowledge my existence. I'd prepared myself emotionally for seeing them, building walls and expectations simultaneously. How can they be so cruel? The question escapes as barely more than a whisper. My own family. Your mother. Aunt Maxine hesitates, then squares her shoulders as if preparing for battle. They decided it would be easier if you weren't there. They didn't want ... complications. The memory of receiving that envelope floods back with crystalline clarity. I'd been standing at my mailbox on a Tuesday morning, and the sunlight had caught the gold embossing as I ran my fingers over my name. There had been such a flutter of hope in my chest then. Maybe this invitation meant healing. Maybe they finally wanted me there, finally recognized that I was worth including. I'd held that envelope for several minutes before even opening it, savoring the possibility of reconciliation. Now that memory feels like a wound being reopened. I remember the family dinner 2 months ago when Nolan announced the engagement. The way his eyes swept the room, connecting with everyone except me. His gaze moved from father's approving nod to mother's delighted gasp to Aunt Maxine's smile. But when it approached my direction, it simply jumped over me as though I were invisible, as though I occupied space that didn't quite exist. Still, I'd smiled and offered congratulations, pretended not to notice the deliberate omission. I'd been so practiced at this pretense by then. That weekend following the announcement, I'd driven to 3 different stores hunting for the perfect dress. Something elegant but not showy. Something that said I belonged among them, that I was sophisticated enough, refined enough, worthy enough to stand beside them in photographs. The saleswoman had commented on my glowing smile as I stood before the mirror, my heart light with hope. She'd asked if I was shopping for a special occasion, and when I'd mentioned my brother's wedding, she'd gushed about how wonderful that must be. I'd let her assume I was one of those sisters who mattered, one of those sisters who was wanted. Now, kneeling to gather the shards of broken crystal, I understand that the dress will never be worn. The gift will never be opened. The hope will remain suspended in that moment before the truth, never allowed to blossom into something real. When Aunt Maxine moves to help, I shake my head. Let me. I need to do this myself. My hands tremble, but my voice has found its steadiness. As though some core of me has finally decided to stop fragmenting and pull itself together. They've always treated me like I was invisible. I say, my voice growing stronger as I speak. Now they've made it official. At least there's a kind of honesty in that, for once, I don't search for explanations to soften what they've done. Don't create excuses for their cruelty or reasons why they might have acted this way. No attempts to understand their perspective or justify their choices. Something shifts inside me as I speak, a tectonic plate finally breaking free after years of pressure, moving from a state of static strain to kinetic energy. I stand taller, meeting Aunt Maxine's tearful gaze. The steering wheel feels slick under my palms as I pull into my parents' circular driveway the next morning. I hadn't slept, had instead spent the night in a strange twilight state between rage and clarity. Their Tudor-style home stands proud against the afternoon sky, its manicured hedges and gleaming windows betraying nothing of the betrayal within. The property is exactly as I remember it, perfect, and cold and fundamentally unwelcoming to anyone who doesn't fit the precise mold they've constructed. I kill the engine but remain seated in my car for several minutes, watching through the bay window as they lounge in the living room, surrounded by wedding photos. My mother's laugh floats through the partially open window, the same delicate, tinkling sound I'd spent decades trying to earn. It's the laugh that emerges when she's pleased with herself, when things have gone exactly according to her carefully orchestrated plans. My father leans back in his leather recliner, looking more relaxed than I've seen him in years. And Nolan, my golden child brother, stands by the mantel holding up a large wedding portrait, his voice carrying clearly across the lawn with the confidence of someone who has never questioned whether he belongs. Best decision we made was making sure she wasn't there to ruin everything like always, he says, and the carelessness in his tone cuts deeper than any planned cruelty could have. A wave of nausea rises as I grip the doorframe, knuckles white against the polished wood. I watch them continue laughing, flipping through album pages with the ease of people completely oblivious to the presence of someone watching their performance. 3 minutes pass before my mother finally notices me standing in the entryway. She doesn't jump up with alarm or excitement. Instead, her champagne glass disappears behind a silver-framed photo with practiced subtlety. A sleight of hand perfected through years of practice, the least she says. Not a question, not a greeting, just acknowledgement of an unexpected intrusion. The wedding was last weekend. You sent me the wrong date. On purpose, my voice sounds steadier than I feel, and I'm grateful for this unexpected composure. I've been expecting to arrive here and fall apart, to cry and beg for explanations. Instead, I find myself speaking with the clarity of someone who has moved beyond the stage of seeking justification. Nolan doesn't even look up from the album. I needed one perfect day without you, he says with the simplicity of someone stating a basic truth, like explaining why the sky is blue or why water is wet. There's no anger in his voice, no defensiveness, just the casual acknowledgement of a decision already made and implemented. You've always disrupted our peace, Elise, mother adds, adjusting her pearl necklace, a nervous habit from childhood that I've watched her repeat countless times during tense family moments. Can't you understand we needed one special occasion without your intensity? Father remains silent in his recliner, eyes downcast, steadying his hands as if they hold secrets only he can decipher. His silence speaks volumes, tacit approval wrapped in cowardice. I've learned to read his silences over the years. They communicate far more than words ever could. This particular silence says, I agree with your mother, and I don't have the courage to defend you. I step further into the room, noting how they occupy the comfortable seating while I stand. The physical representation of our family dynamic couldn't be clearer if it had been staged, by a theatrical director. I am positioned as the outsider even in the house where I grew up, even in the family that shares my blood. I've put thousands of dollars into the lake cottage repairs through my holding company, I say, and the statement hangs in the air between us like a confession neither of us expected. The property taxes alone have been substantial. Did you think I wouldn't find out you've been telling everyone it's still completely yours? Mother waves her hand dismissively, as though I've just mentioned something tedious and irrelevant. That's what successful children do. Mother waves her hand dismissively, as though I've just mentioned something tedious and irrelevant. That's what successful children do. They help their parents. It's your obligation. The word obligation lands heavily. Not love, not gratitude, not even simple acknowledgement. Just obligation, the same word one might use to describe paying taxes or maintaining car insurance. Playing with your little marketing spreadsheets while the rest of us have real careers. Nolan smirks, tossing the album onto the coffee table with careless entitlement. He's never bothered to hide his disdain for my profession, treating it as though I spend my days with finger paints and construction paper rather than managing multi-million-dollar accounts. Dad builds something tangible. I create architectural visions. What do you make besides money? Their words crystallize a truth I've spent years avoiding. To them, I am not a daughter or sister but a resource and ATM with inconvenient emotions they'd rather not acknowledge. I am useful for financial contributions but embarrassing in my existence. I catch my reflection in the ornate mirror above the fireplace. The woman staring back seems diminished somehow, shoulders slightly curved inward, head tilted in a perpetual posture of apology. How long has this stranger been living in my skin? This woman trained to make herself smaller at every family gathering, to speak softer at every holiday dinner, to take up less space, to want less, to expect less. Let me explain something you seem to have forgotten, I say, opening my purse and retrieving a slim folder I'd grabbed from my home office on the drive over this morning. I prepared for this conversation more carefully than I prepared for anything in my professional career. I have documentation of every dollar spent on that cottage, every repair made, every tax bill paid. And most importantly, I have my name on the deed. Not as co-owner, as sole owner. I place the document on the coffee table, watching as Father finally looks up, confusion battling with dawning comprehension across his face. The document is printed on heavy stock paper, official and undeniable. You're welcome to contest it. I continue, my voice gaining strength with each word. But the paperwork is quite thorough. Jenna made sure of that. Jenna? Mother's voice rises an octave. Our family attorney. Jenna Morales. My attorney now. I correct her. For the past 5 years, I transferred my accounts to her office when I realized I needed representation that wasn't compromised by family dynamics. The weight of that statement settles over the room. 5 years. I've been planning this exit for 5 years without any of them knowing. I've been documenting, organizing, preparing. I've been building a framework for independence brick by brick while they continue to assume I would always be available, always be accommodating, always prioritize their needs above my own. 15 minutes later, walking back to my car with hands trembling but steps steady, I'm struck by the silence in the house behind me. No one has followed. No one has called out. My parents have simply let me leave, as though I was never really there to begin with. Thomas Bedford's office feels like sanctuary when I arrive an hour later. His polished mahogany desk is a landscape of careful organization. Everything arranged with the precision of someone who understands that documentation is power. I need to make this official, I tell him. And he doesn't ask for explanations or try to talk me down. Instead, he simply begins pulling files, his movements methodical and practiced, that the documents spread across his desk like battle plans. I sign each one with deliberate strokes, my signature growing more confident with each page. Joint accounts closed. Co-signed loans transferred. Investment portfolios separated. Thomas checks items off his list, his voice carrying the measured cadence of a man who has witnessed family fortunes crumble before perfect timing too, he says, adjusting his wide-rimmed glasses. According to their schedule, your parents should be halfway through their country club luncheon right about now. Your mother will be ordering her second gin and tonic. Your father nodding politely at whatever retired executive has cornered him about the stock market. The predictability of their routine has become my strategic advantage. I know my mother's schedule better than she knows mine. I understand the rhythms of their days, the tennis lesson on Tuesdays, the charity committee meetings on Thursdays, the weekend runs where they perform their family identity for an audience of their peers. This knowledge, which I acquired through years of attempting to fit into their world, now becomes the foundation for my escape from it. What about the restraining order? I ask, sliding the last form across the desk. The words sound foreign in my mouth, official and severe. A restraining order against my own family? The very concept feels surreal, and yet sitting here in Thomas's office with all this documentation spread before me, it seems like the only logical conclusion. Judge Harriman will review it this afternoon, Thomas says, his expression grave. The documentation is thorough. Workplace harassment has clear precedent. I think of my parents' unannounced visits, the scenes in the lobby, the whispers among colleagues that have started circulating since the wedding revelation. I've seen families destroy people, Thomas continues, closing his leather portfolio with a decisive snap. Usually it's slow death by 1,000 cuts, but sometimes it's sudden, a moment of clarity where the victim realizes what's happening and decides to stop participating in their own destruction. You're making the right choice, Elise. I've watched you throughout this process, and I want you to know that I believe you're doing what's necessary for your own survival. The certainty in his voice steadies something inside me that's been trembling for days. My hands have stopped shaking. My breathing has stabilized. The panic that gripped my chest when I first saw that wedding album has transformed into something else, of focused determination to protect myself from further harm. When my phone vibrates, I expect Aunt Maxine's name. Instead, the building security number flashes on the screen. I press the answer button, already bracing for whatever comes next. Miss Hartman. The security officer's voice is professional and calm. There's a situation in the lobby. Your brother is demanding to see you. He's quite agitated. Thomas notices my expression and points to the speakerphone button. I press it, and the officer continues. He's insisting on financial matters. Workplace protocol requires that we document the incident and ask if you want us to proceed with standard procedures for unauthorized visitors. I take a breath, preparing myself. Is he creating a disturbance? Yes, ma'am. He's raising his voice, demanding information about your account status and property holdings. It's disrupting other tenants in the building. Thomas scribbles a note and slides it toward me. This strengthens the restraining order case. Each incident documented is another brick in the legal fortress we're constructing. I'm not coming down. I tell the security officer, my voice steady and clear. Please follow standard protocols for unauthorized visitors. 15 minutes later, my phone rings again. An unfamiliar number displays on the screen. I hesitate before answering, uncertain what confrontation awaits me now. Elise. It's Kendra, Nolan's wife. Her voice wavers with uncertainty. I'm outside your building. I need to talk to you. I close my eyes, bracing for another attack. Another attempt at manipulation. But when I look out the window, I see her standing near the fountain, not angry, not demanding, but vulnerable. She's standing in the afternoon sunlight, looking smaller than I remember her looking on her wedding day. I saw everything, she continues without waiting for my response. The way he acted in your lobby. I had no idea he could be like that. Her voice cracks with genuine distress. He told me you refused to help with the wedding, that you were jealous of our happiness. But that wasn't true, was it? You never even knew when it was happening. Through the window, I watch Kendra brush hair from her face, the diamond on her ring finger catching sunlight. 3 weeks married and already discovering the person behind the performance. The woman I'm observing appears to be in the early stages of a recognition that might take her years to fully process. I wonder if I should maintain the wall I'd built around myself or allow this one small bridge to remain. Could someone so closely tied to my pain become an ally? Or was this another trap I couldn't yet see? When she arrives at my office an hour later, carrying coffee and the kind of nervous energy that comes from making decisions you're not entirely sure about, I study her carefully. She's not here to convince me to forgive Nolan. She's not here to smooth things over or ask me to understand his perspective. Instead, she seems to be here to process her own dawning awareness of what she's married into. I recognize the look on his face, Kendra says, settling into the chair across from my desk. It's the same one my father had when he threatened my mother. I'm not waiting 30 years to admit what I'm seeing. Aunt Maxine arrives at my office the following afternoon, carrying a worn leather briefcase I've never seen before. Her face is etched with an expression of both purpose and sadness. I've been keeping these for years, she says, laying out folders containing printouts of emails, text messages, and financial records dating back a decade. Your mother never believed in deleting anything. Thought she might need leverage someday.
I flipped through pages of correspondence revealing a systematic pattern of emotional and financial exploitation. Each email is a small piece of a larger puzzle, a communication that speaks to deliberate planning and calculated cruelty. Need money for Nolan's business venture. Elise won't mind co-signing. Another message from 3 years later, tell Elise the cottage repairs are minimal. No need to mention the foundation issues. And another, she's coming for Thanksgiving. Hide the new boat until after she leaves. Each message lands like a physical blow. What strikes me most forcefully is the premeditation. This wasn't accidental neglect or unconscious favoritism. This was systematic, deliberate, planned. They made decisions about how to manipulate me and then documented those decisions in writing. She kept records of her own manipulation. I asked, unable to quite believe what I'm reading. Your mother's always been careful, Aunt Maxine says quietly. She kept documentation because she wanted to protect herself if any of you ever challenged her. She never imagined you'd actually leave. In her mind, you'd always be here, complaining maybe, but ultimately compliant. Jenna, my lawyer, arrives as I'm midway through the second folder that day. She scans several key documents, her expression hardening with each page she reviews. This strengthens our position on the cottage ownership considerably, she says, selecting specific emails for her files. The judge will see a clear pattern here. Not just poor family dynamics, but intentional, documented manipulation. Your mother essentially kept a record of her own crimes. Thomas returns with confirmation that additional security measures have been implemented on my accounts. They won't be able to access anything, even with the information they have about you. Your accounts are now completely separated and protected. The following morning, Jenna calls with news that makes me sit down abruptly in my kitchen. The weight of her words, delivered with professional precision, settles over me like a blanket. Judge granted the restraining order, she says. His exact words were, clear pattern of emotional and financial harassment with documented evidence. They can't come within 500 feet of your workplace or residence. Violation results in immediate arrest. 500 feet. A legal distance that finally, officially, makes my safety a matter of law rather than simply a matter of hope. I can breathe easier knowing that if they attempt to approach me, there are legal consequences beyond simply my ability to refuse them entry. That afternoon, Aunt Maxine calls with news that suggests the consequences are rippling outward through the family network in ways I hadn't anticipated. Your cousin Rebecca cancelled her bridge game with your mother, she says. She told me she couldn't look her in the eye after what she did to you. And Uncle Stephen called to say he's removing them from the holiday rotation. He said the family can't support that kind of behavior, not anymore. One by one, the dominoes begin to fall. Nolan's drinking increases as rumors circulate about Kendra moving back to her parents' house. His financial stability leaves with her. The restaurant he opened with my cosign loan begins to struggle without her steady income and her connections to the city's social network. Within weeks, he's filing for bankruptcy protection, and suddenly he understands, perhaps for the first time, that his life doesn't work without someone else's resources propping it up. When the formal eviction notice for the cottage arrives at my parents' house, reality finally sinks in. The consequences they never imagined possible have come due. The cottage that has been in our family for generations, or so they've always claimed, is being legally transferred to my holding company. They have 30 days to vacate the premises. I run my finger over the embossed letterhead of my holding company. The same company that purchased the cottage 3 years ago when they could no longer afford the taxes. The cottage they still believe was theirs, that they've been telling people is still theirs. The truth has a way of revealing itself, one document at a time, until the entire structure of lies becomes impossible to maintain. A week later, on Wednesday morning, the familiar gleam of sunlight across the polished granite lobby of my office building feels different today. I've walked through these doors hundreds of times, but never quite like this, never with the knowledge that my family has orchestrated some kind of intervention, complete with pastoral support. Security guards stand and Miguel exchange knowing glances as my parents enter behind Pastor Williams. Their expressions are a careful study in contrition. Mother's camel hair coat hangs slightly askew on her shoulders, and her normally perfect hair shows telltale strands out of place. Father stands with unusual deference, his shoulders hunched forward in a posture I've never witnessed before. He looks diminished somehow, as though the world has been slowly deflating him. The family pastor walks between them, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. His presence signals that this confrontation is sanctioned by the church, that they've been counseled to pursue reconciliation through religious authority. I can see the calculation in their strategy. What daughter would refuse the counsel of a man of God? Elise, Pastor Williams extends his hand, his voice carrying that practiced tone of gentle authority he uses for hospital visits and funeral services. Your parents thought it might help to have someone neutral present for this conversation. I don't take his hand. There's nothing neutral about someone who's been at our Christmas dinner table for 20 years, Pastor. Someone who watched my mother's performance year after year and never once questioned the authenticity of it. You've been complicit in the facade through your silence. Mother steps forward, her voice wavering with what appears to be genuine emotion. We've been praying about this situation, Elise, about your behavior lately. Praying that you'll find your way back to us. My behavior. The words escape as a quiet laugh that surprises even me. The absurdity is almost too much to bear. They've deliberately excluded me from my own brother's wedding, they've documented their manipulation of me in writing, they've allowed me to financially support them while treating me as an unwelcome burden, and now they're concerned about my behavior. Is that what we're calling it now? When I refuse to continue being financially and emotionally exploited, that's my behavior that needs correcting. Father finally speaks, his usual commanding tone replaced with something resembling humility. The cottage has been in our family for generations, Elise. Your grandfather built it with his own hands. Grandfather built it, yes, I respond. And you've been responsible for maintaining it for the last 30 years. You've also been the ones unable to pay the property taxes for the last 8 years, which is why I had to step in and purchase it to prevent foreclosure. Your nostalgia for that cottage doesn't change the legal documentation that proves I now own it. Pastor Williams places a gentle hand on my arm, attempting to guide me back toward forgiveness and acceptance. Forgiveness is divine, Elise. They're still your parents. There are bonds that transcend disagreements. Disagreements. I repeat, feeling heat rise in my neck. Is that really what we're calling deliberate cruelty? They didn't forget I existed. They actively, consciously decided that my existence was inconvenient. They sent me the wrong date to my own brother's wedding on purpose. They lied about property they claimed to own. They used me as a financial resource while treating me as a social liability. That's not a disagreement. That's predatory behavior. Mother's voice drops to an urgent whisper. Think about what people at church will say. Families shouldn't air their difficulties in public. The Thornton girl just went through something similar with her parents. Everyone's talking. Her concern isn't about my well-being or about the damage to our family relationships. It's about social perception, about what people at church will think, about the family reputation in the community. She's essentially admitting that her primary concern has never been my happiness, but rather maintaining the appearance of a functional family. I reach into my leather portfolio and remove 2 envelopes, placing them side by side on the reception desk. The contrast between them is stark, one official-looking, the other bearing personal touches. This is the invitation to Nolan's wedding I received, I say, holding up the first envelope. And this is the real one. Aunt Maxine showed me afterward. Pastor Williams peers at them, confusion creasing his forehead as he notes the different dates. The evidence is undeniable, physical proof of deliberate deception. They sent me the wrong date on purpose so I wouldn't attend my own brother's wedding. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an oversight. It was deliberate exclusion, planned and executed with precision. My mother probably had an email thread about it in her files, documenting the decision to deceive me. Some bridges burn for a reason, I continue, my voice steady and clear. This is one of them. I've spent my life forgiving, Pastor. I've turned the other cheek so many times I've been spinning in circles, becoming dizzy from my own attempts at grace. Now I'm spending it living, actually living, rather than simply existing in the margins of my own family. I lock eyes with him directly. Did they tell you about the lake cottage? How I've been making the payments for 8 years while they pretended it was still theirs? Or how they've needed financial assistance every time Nolan starts a new business venture? Or perhaps they mention how they forgot to invite me to Thanksgiving dinner 3 years running but remembered to call when they needed their roof replaced. The pastor's expression shifts, the certainty in his eyes wavering as he glances between my parents. He's beginning to understand that this situation is more complex than a simple case of family discord requiring spiritual intervention. Elise, my mother says quietly, tears scattering at the corners of her eyes. After all we've sacrificed for you. I turn to face her fully, standing taller than I ever have in their presence. Name one sacrifice you've made for me that wasn't actually for Nolan. One time you prioritized my needs above his. One moment when you chose me. The silence stretches between us, becoming their answer. I pick up a manila envelope from the reception desk and hand it to my father. These are all the family photos I kept. The ones where you crop me halfway out of the frame or where I'm standing slightly apart from everyone else. I've been holding onto them thinking someday I'd feel like I belonged in those frames. But I've realized that the problem was never me. It was always you, your inability or unwillingness to see me as someone worthy of full inclusion. I'm releasing myself from the obligation of being your daughter, I say, the words bringing an unexpected rush of oxygen into my lungs, as though I've been holding my breath for decades and can finally exhale. You're free from having to pretend I matter to you. You can stop performing the role of loving parents. It's exhausting for all of us, and frankly, we are all terrible actors. You can't just stop being family, my mother says, her voice rising in protest. We've sacrificed for you. You already said that, I respond quietly. And I'm still waiting for an example. Father clutches the envelope of photos, his fingers trembling slightly. "This isn't over, Elise," he says finally. "Actually, it is," I reply, turning toward the elevator banks. "Stan will show you out. I have work to do." 2 weeks later, the news reaches me through Aunt Maxine. Nolan has lost his job at the architecture firm. Apparently, his business partner discovered some questionable financial practices and terminated their partnership. His marriage is showing cracks under financial pressure. Kendra's parents have taken her side, and she's living in their home pending divorce proceedings. I feel nothing but a distant pity, like observing strangers through a Rain Street window. The narrative I spent years constructing, the one where my brother was special and talented and destined for success, has crumbled without my financial support to prop it up. The first letter arrives at my office the following Tuesday. The envelope bears my father's distinctive handwriting, precise capitals with flourished edges. I place it on my desk beside my coffee, studying it as steam rises between us. Inside might be more manipulation, more guilt, more demands disguised as family obligation. Or perhaps something else entirely. I haven't decided whether to open it yet, and that choice, I realize, is the most valuable thing I've gained, the ability to make decisions about my family on my own terms, without the pressure of obligation or the weight of blood relation. A year later, the morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my lake house office, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floor. This space, which once belonged to my family, now belongs solely to me. I've renovated it into something that reflects my aesthetic and my values rather than maintaining the tired traditional decor my parents always insisted upon. My photographs line the walls, landscapes I captured during weekend trips when I stopped waiting for invitations that never came. No family portraits here, just moments that belong solely to me. My phone rings, and for the first time in years, my shoulders don't tense at the sound. I answer professionally. "Elise Hartman." "This is Rebecca Chen from Harrison Design Group," the voice on the other end says. "We've heard exceptional things about your boutique marketing approach, and we'd like to discuss retaining your services for our brand repositioning." As I explain my philosophy about authentic brand storytelling, a philosophy I've developed precisely because I've spent so many years understanding the cost of maintaining false narratives, I noticed a wall calendar behind my desk. Where family obligations once dominated, personal milestones now stretch across the months. There's a half marathon scheduled in August that I've been training for on my own terms, a photography workshop in September with an instructor whose work I admire, and a week in Montana scheduled for October because I've always wanted to see big sky country. When the call ends, I lean back in my chair and breathe deeply. The cottage that once symbolized my family's hold over me has become my sanctuary. I've filled it with furniture I've chosen myself, art that speaks to my sensibilities, books from authors who understand the landscape of family trauma and recovery. The mail arrives with its usual shuffle through the brass slot. Among the business correspondence sits a thick cream envelope, my name written in flowing calligraphy. My heart stutters momentarily before stating. Another wedding invitation, my cousin Rachel this time. She's marrying someone from California, someone no one in the family knew before she met him. I run my finger along the embossed edge, remembering how a similar envelope once carried such bitter disappointment. This envelope feels different somehow. The date looks correct. The RSVP card includes a handwritten note. "It wouldn't be the same without you, Elise. Please come." For a moment, I consider what's expected, what the old Elise would have done automatically and without question. Drop everything. Find the perfect gift. Prepare answers to intrusive questions about my single status and childless life. Practice smiling through moments of exclusion and discomfort. Instead, I check my calendar. The wedding falls during my photography retreat in Maine, a commitment I made to myself months ago, a promise to myself that I intend to keep. I select a response card from my desk drawer and write a genuine note explaining my absence and wishing them joy. I'll send a thoughtfully selected gift, not to earn approval, but because giving brings me genuine pleasure when it's freely chosen. That evening, Aunt Maxine arrives first for our dinner, carrying her famous apple crumble. The recipe has been in her family for 3 generations, and she makes it because she loves the process and because she knows it brings joy to the people she cares about. Thomas appears with a bottle of wine he's been saving for a special occasion. Jenna rushes in last, apologizing for caught running late, her laugh filling my kitchen with the kind of warmth that comes from genuine connection rather than obligatory family bonds. 1 year, Thomas says, raising his glass once we're seated around my dining table. His expression is thoughtful, reverent almost. 1 year of boundaries that would make a fortress envious. To finding family, Aunt Maxine adds, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you build. To choosing your own people. And to strength in starting over, Jenna finishes, squeezing my hand gently. We clink glasses as laughter bubbles up from somewhere deep inside me, rusty but genuine. It's the laughter of someone who has survived something and lived to tell the tale. Later, after they've gone, I sit at my desk and open my father's latest letter. Unlike his early correspondence filled with guilt and demands, this one acknowledges harm without seeking absolution. I failed you, he writes simply. You deserve better. I should have protected you instead of allowing your mother to determine your worth in our family. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I should have seen then. I placed the letter in a wooden box with the others, not displayed proudly, nor destroyed in anger, just acknowledged as part of a story I no longer need to rewrite. Beside me sits a brochure for a mentoring program helping young women navigate early career challenges and family dynamics that might otherwise limit their potential. I've decided to volunteer with them, sharing my story with women who are still caught in the web of family obligation and emotional manipulation. My travel itinerary for Portugal, a solo journey I've dreamed about since college, rests beneath it. Both represent futures built on my terms, in my image. I've learned that healing doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. It doesn't require forgiveness or continued contact. It simply means building a life so full, so meaningful, so genuinely yours that the absence of people who refuse to see you becomes less important than the presence of people who do. It means understanding that family is defined, not by blood or legal documents, but by those who treat your heart with care. Some bridges burn for reasons that are entirely justified. Some relationships end because they were never real in the first place. What matters is what you build after the burning stops. As I close the box of letters, I wonder if I'll ever reach a point where I can think about my family without feeling something, sadness, anger, relief, a complex mixture of all 3. Perhaps that's the goal of healing, not to reach a state where you feel nothing, but to reach a state where what you feel doesn't control your life. I've achieved what I set out to achieve. I have the lake cottage, now, legally and irrevocably mine. I have a career that's thriving, a salary that I've earned through my own intelligence and work ethic. I have people around me who genuinely care about my well-being. I have freedom, the freedom to make my own choices, to travel when I want to spend my money as I choose, to construct a life that reflects my values rather than the values my family tried to force upon me. The most important wedding, I've come to understand, wasn't Nolan's after all. It was my own, the wedding of the woman I am to the woman I've always been capable of becoming. That ceremony required no witnesses, no photographs, no cake. It required only the courage to finally see myself as I truly am, not as my family define me, but as I define myself. I stand at the window of my lake house and watch the sun set over the water that borders my property. This view is mine now. These moments of peace and solitude are mine. My future is mine to construct, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And it's never looked more beautiful.